Hello everyone, thank you for joining again. I'm Shamal Arif, part of the OKE Cloud Infrastructure team. So to continue on our Kubernetes series, in this video we're just going to see how to use kubectl to access the cluster and how do you use the Kubernetes dashboard. All right, so we created a cluster, just a test cluster through quick create, and I'm on the details page of the test cluster. So if I scroll down and on the left hand side where we see the resources, over here in the quick start section, you can take a look at a couple of things. So the quick start gives you access to how do you get access to the cluster using the kubeconfig file, and then you can use the standard kubectl tool to look at how do you actually create the application and get connected. So the access kubeconfig gives you the details. It requires you to download the latest or the CLI version, which is at least above than 2.6.4. You can check the OCI CLI version by OCI-V, create a directory in your home directory, and then just download the kubeconfig file by using the command that is listed out here. In the command, basically it's using the OCI CLI, and in the case of cluster ID, using the cluster ID which is for the specific cluster that you are currently on, and it saves by default in the kubecon.kube/config file. If you want to give a different file, you can always just put a different file listed over here. So I already have a cube. I have already done this couple of steps, but I'll quickly show you where my kubeconfig file exists. So let's take a look at OCI CLI version. I also have saved the config file, the kubeconfig file, in this location, and I have kubectl already installed in my laptop. So now I'll just do kubectl dash cluster info, and this actually tells me where my Kubernetes master is running and the kube DNS, which gets automatically started as well. I'll just do a kubectl get nodes to get a list of the nodes which are my worker nodes created in the container engine for Kubernetes. So I had 3 worker nodes and 3 availability domains, which is showing that these are the 3 worker nodes. The name is actually taken from a private IP. So the private IP that you see here is just the private IP of the quick cluster that we created, and it takes the private IP of it. So if we have a public IP and if we have a public cluster, like the worker nodes are in public subnets, the naming would probably just show you the public IPs in there. Look at kubectl get pods to see a list of the pods. I can also take a look at what are my services which are running right now. So I just have like no particular services running, and you are actually just using their standard kubectl to connect to your Kubernetes cluster. Now that we have connected to the Kubernetes cluster using kubectl, let's take a look at the next steps which it makes you do for the accessing the Kubernetes dashboard. So if you want to access the Kubernetes dashboard, by default the Kubernetes dashboard service account doesn't have the administrative privileges to get a list of all the different services or namespaces or other individual components running in the Kubernetes cluster. So what this process does is that it creates a service account by the name of OKE admin, and then attaches this service account to the cluster admin role by creating a cluster role binding. So there is a cluster admin role which pre-exists, which basically gives you a complete access of the cluster. So it creates a service account and creates a cluster role binding, attaching the service account of OKE admin to your cluster admin role. Once you create this YAML file, you apply it. It creates that service account. It creates a cluster role binding, and then the token which is available as part of this service account, you use that token to actually log in into your Kubernetes dashboard. So I followed that process, and I'm logged into the Kubernetes dashboard. In the Kubernetes dashboard, on the left hand side is all the different resources that you see. So within the cluster, what are the different namespaces that exist? So you have the kube system, which consists of all the namespaces within your system itself, like controller namespace, controller pods, schedulers, bunch of the system pods. Then you have a kube public namespace and the default namespace. What are the persistent volumes if it exists in your case? What are the different nodes which are available? So you have the different nodes and the labels which are attached to the nodes. It gives the details on CPU requests and CPU limits, etc. The storage classes which exist. And then additional things like cron jobs or replica sets, stateful sets, any ingress controllers you have, config maps. So all the details that are available in your cluster basically. So that's all on the series on Kubernetes level 100. Thanks for joining.